What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the MLO Project featuring Eminem, and not that guy, not that Eminem, but Michael McAllister and me, your host, Frazier. We are both so excited to be here with you today on another episode. Michael, what's up, bro?
What's up, man? How we doing today?
We're doing fantastic. You seem to be in a way better mood than you were these last few episodes where, quite honestly, you brought the energy down way too much. Way too much. So it looks happy.
I just heard that. I just went back and listened to the episode where at the beginning, and I lost it. I completely forgot about that until I heard it.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you got it in there a couple of times. So let's let that one be, right? Let's
never again.
Yeah, let's never replicate that one again. Yeah. But hey guys, we're excited for today's episode, and to be honest with you, we're excited for every episode just because they're awesome and we have fun doing these things. But we got a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of things going on in the industry, a lot of things that is going on, with the new book, Roll It, Aim, new things that we're doing here at Empower. There's a lot of cool things. We won't, get into all of them, but one thing that we do have coming up, and that's going to be somewhat the purpose of this episode. We're not going to be talking about like the webinar during the episode, but we're going to be talking about the topic because it's one that we see a lot of lift in. It's something that, a lot of our clients are doing, and it's something that, we're looking forward to doing more of. And that is going direct to consumer with a webinar. And so we've seen our friend Luke Shankula do this with like a VA webinars, first time home buyer webinars. We are doing a webinar on, Michael, remind me, the 24th.
Yep,
is that right?
24th.
Yeah.
Thursday.
So this month on the 24th, Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Eastern?
12. Oh, good.
Oh, look at that. Tripped you up, huh? Tripped you up with the details.
It's noon Eastern. And by the time we release this, it'll be this week. It'll be this Thursday. Noon.
So it's this Thursday. Yeah, so it's this Thursday, just a couple days from today. We got a nooner for you. And that's I said it while I was drinking. But we got 12 p.m. with Chelsea Gardner. If you don't know her, she's Fully Aligned Marketing. We're looking forward to partnering with her on this webinar, and she does this with her clients. She's awesome at running Facebook ads for loan officers, great at doing this specific strategy. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So it'd be interesting to know how many of you out there in the audience are actually deploying this strategy. The people that I've talked to are doing great with it. And we're definitely going to have one of those loan officers on in the future as a guest, so we could actually kind of dive more into it. But I want to talk about the strategy of going direct to consumer with a webinar offer. And so, Michael, what do you see out there with the strategy?
We have a couple clients that have done webinars in the context of almost middle of the funnel. So especially in the lead gen side, like clients that are generating a high volume of leads. Whether it's Google, Facebook, you're getting leads from real estate agents that are generating them with Boomtown or whatever. Regardless, like you start that conversation with a very low level of trust, with a really low level of like connection. And so we've seen LOs use webinars, and this is going back, 4 or 5 years now, use webinars as a way to engage people, like the leads that they've generated with. So they're, marketing these webinars to their lead lists and getting them involved. It's only been recently, and obviously like with the advent of technology, like more technology, more normalization of Zoom calls, video calls, even for local relationships, we've seen it recently expand into like a lead generation technique, right? Imagine 5 years ago trying to get the average consumer onto a webinar, right? Or I guess 6 years ago, pre-COVID. Imagine trying to get the average consumer onto a webinar and have that be a source of like engagement and trust strong enough to initiate a mortgage transaction. That's pretty hard to imagine and wrap your mind around, or at least it was for us back then. And that just isn't the case anymore, right? Like people are primed for this. The To me, you know, and I'm a little bit, or I'm biased and not the average consumer. But from what I've seen in the market, people are just way more willing to get on Zoom calls. They're way more willing to register for a webinar. That's a normal thing. That's not a weird, edgy thing to do anymore. And so, yeah, we don't, honestly, I haven't, as much as I've seen the popularity increase, I haven't been super plugged into this strategy since it started to become more popular in the last year or so again. And so I talked to Luke yesterday about their strategy and what they're doing with that. And I think it's really cool. I know that people are having great success with it. I think it's, you know, aligned with the future of marketing in the mortgage industry, you know, where it's more likely to become more prevalent and more profitable before it becomes less. And there's not that many opportunities in the mortgage industry that are like that right now. So I think that's, you know, that's really the powerful thing about this is there's a ton of untapped potential.
Yeah. It's, you know, if you're a loan officer listening to this now, this is a strategy deployed on the real estate side years ago, and it worked great. So we ran targeted ads, hyper local ads, buying a house, and we had a couple different messages. But you know, what we found is that our cost per sign up, right, was relatively cheap, right? And so you think about it this way: is that if you were going to have face to face, right? So think about value of investment. And so if I was saying look, I'm giving an opportunity to talk with, you know, potentially 150 consumers that are first time home buyers, right? And would you pay, you know, $18, $25, $36 per seat per head, you know, to be in a room with those first time home buyers that have all raised their hand to get more information? Because you think about what do you pay for just general advertising? What do you pay generally for running ads or whatever to get live people, butts in seats? And so when we ran this, we ran this on an on-demand, meaning it was a pre-recorded webinar. But we found on the agent side, we were getting more listing appointments, more, buyer appointments, because basically what we're doing is we're looking at the messaging, what people were searching for on Google, people are searching for on YouTube, that type of stuff. And then having a solution webinar to it, based off of the hook, right? The 5, should you buy a home in 2025, right? Is the market going to crash? Those types of things. And so, so from the people that I've talked to that have run it now, right. And the messaging is different, depending on if some people are doing it on reverse, some people, most of it I see on the VA and the first time home buyer. So we'll just kind of keep it with that. But focusing on certain, segments of that. And then what we're seeing, I think Luke has posted a couple times of his cost per, registration, and somewhere, like I said, it's anywhere in between that 18 and 30. And sometimes it's different. It's different for everybody. But one is you don't have to pay. You don't have to do this as a paid ad sort of deal, right? It helps obviously because you're going to get more people. But the reason why this matters is because when you're doing traditional, let's say you're just doing traditional ad spend, right? Whether it's Google or Facebook, and maybe you're throwing a video out there, like a short form, or maybe it's just what I see most loan officers do is just a graphic or a flyer of some kind of some offer, as opposed to doing, having them live in front of you so you could real time answer questions that they may have, right? So it is that, like Michael said, people are more apt to do Zoom calls now than they were before. But now you have these people that are live with you. They're seeing your face. They're seeing you interact with them in real time. And so it goes to that whole know, trust deal, because you're going to get more of a conversion path in a live webinar with how many people are there, as opposed to something that is just a static graphic ad, or even just a short video. And so you get more of a conversion. So you think about it this way. Let's say you spend, $500 promoting this webinar, right, on an ad. All you need, is one person, really, right? You just need one person to be able to have that conversation with. And that's really what you think about, is that this is where the math comes into play as an originator, as you think about in terms of, all right, what's my average commission, and what am I willing as an investment to get the opportunity for the conversation to get an application and loan, right? So you also think about it in terms of, like, this is what I always tell loan officers is, like, you think about all levels of your business, right? Like, how much is a review worth? A review, you think of your average commission as an opportunity. So, like, what are you willing to invest in that opportunity, right? And then you think about it at scale. So, like, overall, like, if you have to spend, $1,000 to get a $6,000, whatever the average commission, your average commission happens to be, right? So if it's $1,000, are you willing to invest $1,000 to get the opportunity for $6,000, right? So it's like, it's stuff that, like, coaches, like, that I've talked about, Carl White, like Christine Beckwith, like, we always talk about, like, if I put that amount of money in a machine and I'm getting that, a 5 or 10x return in it, am I willing to do it? But we do know people that are, generating apps every month from this, their leads. And one of the benefits that I see is it's not a widely used strategy. So that means that, like, you have a little bit of a land grab opportunity because it's not as noisy out there, where I tend to see this more on the real estate side, but now seeing it more on the mortgage side.
Yeah, I definitely think, like you said, and like I said earlier, that the opportunity is going to get bigger before it gets smaller with this. Like, it's going to become more normalized, and but also that means that window of opportunity is here, and potentially not going to be here for very, very long, to be one of those people that can go in, establish themselves in their market, be known for these webinars, and not be looked at as, not be seen as like a copycat within the market. One thing that I think is powerful with these types of things is the ancillary benefits that you get from running consistent long form content, like having a format for putting out long form content consistently. So what I mean by this, like, I think about our weekly breakdown on High Level for Mortgage Pros. Okay, so High Level for Mortgage Pros, we've done the weekly breakdown now for like a year and a half. I think it's been every single week. Last week, our video got like 22 views because we just switched from sending it out to our audience as a YouTube video to sending it out to our audience as a Loom video. We're experimenting with that a little bit. But even before that, like, the best we've gotten on a weekly breakdown video is maybe 150 views. We've been doing this for a year and a half. That's crazy. Like, if we were doing this YouTube channel just and the weekly breakdown just for the growth and the opportunities that came from this, it wouldn't be worth it. Like, on paper attribution, like deals that have come from these videos, it wouldn't be worth it. But what makes it worth it is the ancillary benefits that we get from it. The, like, ability to repurpose and have something valuable to post on our timeline, on our Facebook pages anytime, right? The ability to have something to, like, send out to our audience to remind them that, hey, this is what we do. This is what we're experts in. Even if they're not consuming it every time, we have a very clear opt out at the bottom of every email where we send this weekly breakdown out. We send that weekly breakdown email to 1,300 loan officers. And although our views are super low, open rate open rate on that, and engagement rate, even people sending emails back thanking for this, way, way higher than those views would lead you to believe. And so there's this other value that we're getting while we do this. And I don't think that going into a strategy like this, that you should think, that you should discount all lack of results for the pursuit of ancillary benefits. Obviously, I'm not saying ignore if it's not working. But what I am saying is that, as with any marketing, this is going to be best served as part of a bigger long-term strategy for your business. And it's going to be best served tying into the other things that you do within your business. And so if you are going to pursue a strategy like running webinars, I just would suggest and implore you to not silo the strategy and dip your toe in the water and be like, we'll see how it works. I'm going to run a webinar or two and I'm going to see how it works. Because if you do that, you won't see any of the ancillary benefits. You're going to execute, half-ass, and then at the end of the day, it's just like you're just wasting your time. And so, this is one of those things, like with, in my opinion, most marketing strategies these days. 5-6 years ago, there was, plenty of different ways that you could just dip your toe in, try something, close a deal or two, be like, that wasn't really for me, and get out. And those opportunities are like slimming down. Like, you really have to go you really have to go in on these strategies when you go in on them in order to get the benefit from it. And so I would just say, like, this is just like any other of those opportunities or those strategies, where, like, no, this shit will work if you work it. Like, it's more conversations, it's expert positioning, it's the ancillary benefits of having other content to distribute all the time. It 100% is a winning strategy. You just have to decide, like, are you ready for that? Are you ready to, like, go in and commit to that?
Yeah. And, when you're thinking about how else to do this, think about bringing other people, and not just like agents, right? Like, you could do that too. And that way, if you co-market this together, you hit a wider group of people. But think about your clients, right? Like, could you do a webinar that you're sending out to your database about like educating them on the homestead exception? Right? Like, could you do a database about like a tax advantages as a homeowner, and bring in, a tax person, bring in a CPA, bring in other people, and think about like terms of like, how do I do this to get as much information as I can out there to the people in my sphere, right? Based off of that. So the webinar isn't just about, people you don't know and like getting that in there. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's like, you could do this all over the place. You could do this as something that you do once a month, that you have on all of like your newsletter, all of that stuff. And maybe it's like, hey, the third Thursday of every month, I do a first time home buyer class. Right. And you put that on all your stuff, people invite people and stuff like that. And if you're not running ads to it or running any spin to it, it doesn't matter if you have like one person on it or 10 people. And sometimes I've seen this as loan officers do like in-person events and nobody show up. I've seen, and what they did is they just like practice it. They use it to learn from like, all right, what can I do better and whatever. It's the right mindset. Stings a little bit, of course, but like, you want to have the right mindset. But if you do this online and nobody shows up, or 1 or 5 people, who cares? That's 5 people that you get to have a conversation with. And if you're doing it organically and you're doing it consistently, and then at some point, and guys, like, I do this as a marketer, I do that, I can't remember the last time I've paid any money to do a webinar, but I've had, 1,000 people on a webinar, 500 people on a webinar, 200 people. I've had 15 people show up, right? Like, it doesn't really matter. The point is those are people that I get to talk to, right? As an opportunity. And so, and so you can do the exact same thing. But like Michael said, like, like, don't like pour into it, right? Like, don't just half-ass it and just kind of like do it. Like, this is something, a strategy that absolutely work. Every vertical does it in some form or fashion. As I mentioned, I really deployed this on the real estate side. About 5-6 years ago, it was great. It was like one of the top real estate coaches at the time. Like, that's how he built his entire business, was just consistently running ads. And like, he was spending a lot of it, but he was getting, probably about 12 to 15 sides from this every single month. Right. And so like, it's an easy investment. And so that's what I want you to think about, is like long-term, how you're investing in that.
How do you think, like, obviously the landscape of follow-up and of marketing automation has changed a lot in the last 5-6 years. Shameless plug for High Level and Empower here, but like, how has the ability to like extract or convert value from these webinars, and the ability to get butts and seats, like, how has that changed with a platform like with a platform like High Level? Like, how does that look different than 5-6 years ago, running a webinar, trying to get people to show up, following up afterwards, etc.? Like, how is that? I think for a lot of people, they might be intimidated by the idea of what this looks like, injecting this into their business looks like, when really, with tools today like High Level, it made it a lot more straightforward. You have experience with that? Can you speak a little bit to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes it worse, to be honest with you. No, I'm just kidding. No, throw a curveball at you. No, dude, it's so, because when I did this, like the systems, there was no high level, like at least not at scale, like the way it is today. So like I had to build, like I used to use a landing page called Unbounce, right? Like, and so like that was like the service that I did, and there was this service, that service, and so I had to bolt all these together. I will say, like, this is one of the things that we're going to be talking about with Chelsea on the webinar, is now that you have all these integrated services, you could do the landing page, the registration page, the webinar, you could do all of that stuff integrated into high level. The registrations go into your contact database. You could build out your workflows and automations for like the follow-up, so it's instantaneous. Reminders for the webinar, you could do reminders post webinar, follow-up people who didn't attend, like, so you could have all that integrated now. So now, whereas before you kind of had like you had to manually kind of like put these buckets and do all that stuff and integrate all the systems, now with something like high level, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. And so if you're the ones that what you brought up a good thing that I didn't even mention. So regardless of high level or whatever, you do want to make sure, and this is the benefit of using someone like Chelsea and using someone like us, but even if you're managing this, you want to make sure that if you're going to spend the time and the effort, and more importantly, the money on doing these webinars, like, you want to make sure that you have the follow-up. You want to make sure that you just aren't doing registrations and then you follow up with them like maybe, right? You want to have this stuff so it's all built in as a system and process. One is it's easy to rinse and repeat then at that point, so that then you basically just duplicate it and run it back the next month. Now, here's the cool thing, is that if you see, like, it allows you to see like certain touch points and success and responses from the consumer. So it allows you to optimize your communications and stuff there. But here's the thing, like, what if you crush it? Like, you do this one webinar and you crush it 1 month and you get like 30 apps, right? Like, and no joke, like, I've had like that type of success before. Like, what happens when you get like, really successful? Now you have it blueprinted and you have it set, and now you just duplicate it, and then you have that webinar, and maybe that's something that you throw on demand. Or you're just like, all right, this is what I say, this is how I do it, and now I just run it back. And let's say you're spending like 500 in ad spend. You're like, all right, like, how much would you spend? And this is, as a loan officer, this is where you want to do the sales math in your head, is like, what are you willing to spend? Let's say you get 5 apps out of it. What are you willing to spend for the opportunity to get 5 applications? Right? Is $500, is it worth it? I think so. Right? If we're looking at average commission, 300,000, 6,000 commission, like, if, average home price, again, this is stuff that we came up in, as far as like talking to, so we've landed on anywhere from like 4,000 to 6,000 average commission, probably around 6,000. Right? So that's an opportunity of $30,000 in commission. Is that worth a $500 investment? I think so. I think that pencils out, pretty good. And then you're like, all right, well, what if I spend 1,000, right? Like, what if I spent like 2,000? That's when you start, and that's how the paid ad game works. But to Michael's point, is that one is having someone that knows this, like a Chelsea, to do that, someone that has the follow-up system like us in the background. Well, but even if you don't have that, make sure that you have the follow-up systems, that you have the strategies and systems and processes in place. Otherwise, this is just another strategy that you're kind of like not putting your best foot forward on, and you're not reaching the full potential if you're not having this.
No. What do you think this does as far as opening up access to other markets? Like, I mean, obviously we know that the internet and Zoom calls and stuff have given us opportunities to go into other markets, but like, do you, and I don't want to go too far into this, but it just popped into my head. Like, do you think that if you're putting your visionary, like, forecasting hat on, do you think in 5 years we see more LOs that are multi-state licensed and not bound to their home market as a result of this, as a result of this strategy, as a result of, like, more LOs running webinars? Because if you can run webinars, like, you're only limited by the number of states that you're licensed in at that point, right?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I think one is, we're already seeing that already, regardless of the webinar funk. We're already seeing multi-state. We're seeing these people doing, national companies, and it's not like anything new, but like, you're seeing more of a prevalence, especially on like the wholesale side or the broker side. Now, what I would say to this is that, like, one thing that I focus on with my coaching is I focus on YouTube and blogging, right? And that's national. And so, like, I have a guy in my group right now that regularly runs, 43 active loans in his pipeline. His calendar's booked 2.5 weeks out. Now, think about, and everyone's like, I'm sure ERs are picking up now, like, how do you do that? Like, he's using YouTube now. Then if he folded webinar, what it allows him to do is, when you get a following on like YouTube and blog, and you're combining those together, and you start having that interactive, and people are like, I can only schedule so many one-on-one calls. What if you in turn, right? What if you in turn had a webinar piece of that was, again, consistently once a month, that was in all your YouTube videos, all the different, when people watch or, register, you have a reminder like, hey, that's your one to many. So you could have a one to many, and then you could guide them in that webinar to then fill out an app. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like,
you could do a 10:03 walkthrough webinar, right? Where like
right?
everybody
So,
pulls up Blend at the same time. And
yeah, right. Like, you're like, yeah, this is how you fill out your app. And, this is like, so they get what they wanted to, because they're already watching your YouTube, they're filling your webinar. And then as an originator, like, if you're trying to scale, like I said, you can't, like, his calendar's booked 2.5 weeks out. If a consumer wanted to talk to him today, they'd have to wait 2.5 weeks. Right. So, but what if they had an ability to do that webinar or on demand webinar, both? Like, hey, you want a live webinar? I do those. I do an on demand webinar. That's that's basically an extension of this YouTube. That's a training extension of this video. That's on demand 24/7. Or every Thursday, or even if you picked out like one day a week that you're saying, hey, every Thursday at noon Eastern, I do a live webinar where you could ask me questions and stuff like that. And then that's just one to many. It frees up his time, because then he doesn't have a calendar booked up. And then the call to action on that is fill out an app. So, like, that's basically an intake call, one to many. So that's where you start playing the big game in this.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. I think, if there's one like final takeaway from this, it's like if you've been in this industry long enough, you've heard about webinars for the last decade. Like the concept of a webinar is not new. But you look at the way society and the general public has shifted over the last 10 years. If you want to look at that full period of time, and like, it'd be hard to deny that like the conditions are primed for this play to be like bigger than it's ever been. And so if you've written off webinars in the past, or you tried webinars before and are shrugging off this because of that, you're definitely making a mistake.
100%. All right, dude, this was a good one, man. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of it, and hopefully thinking differently about your marketing. And I'm telling you, my friends, like, this is like a whole new world, one to many, a lot of ways to do this stuff. YouTube, blogging, the webinars. Make sure everything's in the show notes. You register for the for the webinar that we're doing with Chelsea. You actually get a firsthand into like this process, how the ads, the whole thing. Like we're peeling back the curtain on all of this stuff, so you could see all of it, in motion. So register for that webinar. Again, it's Thursday at noon. And as always, this was another amazing episode of the MLO Project that is powered by Empower LO. We are your high-level experts in the mortgage industry. On behalf of Mr. McAllister, I am Frazier, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.